はじめまして。僕はスターク・デイビドです。よろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いいたします。日本語話せるんですね。
少しだけ話せます。
素晴らしい。
いえ、まだまだです。Thanks so much for joining me. Today I have John LaDue talking about Children of Yamato, which is already streaming on Amazon Prime after a successful run in Japan. It is a fascinating documentary about kind of Japan and some of the challenges faced by the youth, but then also goes back and looks into how some of the policies in Japan's past have shaped that, and then goes way back into areas I did not expect it to go about some of Japan's origins and history and how Japan's culture was kind of created. I thought it was a really interesting documentary. I thought it had a lot of good insights and some really beautiful footage of Japan. So if you're interested in Japan, definitely check it out. And thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So first question, it kind of get into it in the documentary, but like what inspired this documentary? What made you want to tell this story? Was it your own kind of search for identity in your, strange upbringing, or was it something else that kind of like made you, want to look at this?
Yeah, it definitely was a personal journey. I call this film my soul journey. Um, I kind of wanted to make sense of just all the elements of my life, having been born in Hawaii on Pearl Harbor Day, and then moving to Japan, then have a Japanese American mixed children, and um, I really wanted to explore for their sakes what it truly means to be Japanese, and what it truly means to be a child of Yamato. So Yamato is another word for the people of Japan. They call themselves the people of Yamato. And so I wanted to go in deep into the history of what that means to be Japanese. And then also as an American who grew up in Japan, um, the World War II history. I mean, I thought it was just, it was set. This is just how what happened. Everyone in the world now, believes that, you know, um, the U.S. was on the right side of history and Japan was, the Nazis of the East, and so it was settled. Um, but then as I did more research, as I continued to do more research and talk to scholars in the U.S. and Japan with, a different perspective on history, I kind of wanted to explore what we think we know about World War II, what we think we know about who was on the right side of history, and maybe it's not so clear cut. And there's a famous line where it says, "History is written by the victors,"
Hmm.
right?
Yep, exactly.
And so history is definitely written by the victors, and the victors were the U.S. in this case, and they wrote the history of who was right and who was wrong. And anybody who's a student of history will know history is complicated. A lot of times, you can't just say, the U.S. was the good guys and Japan was the bad guys. It's not so clear cut. And so I wanted to really give it a um, I wanted to look at it without any preconceived notions of who was right and who was wrong, for the sake of my kids too, because they're Japanese, and so they've been told, oh yeah, Japan was did this horrible thing in World War II, and this, the 5 years, 1940 to 1945, that defines who the Japanese people are, because you were the Nazis of the East, and these horrible things to China and Korea, and they still talk about that to this day. But as I explored that history, I realized it might be a lot more complicated. And this film is a form of a kind of a pushback about the history that we all collectively acknowledge to be true, and just a bit of a pushback and be like, wait a minute, even if you watch my film and you're like, no, I'm not buying it. Um, Let me just say this: perhaps history is a little bit more complicated than we all thought.
It always is. And I thought some of the insights, especially with how maybe Japanese culture was intentionally forgotten after the war, were really fascinating. Because, I've kind of heard, I grew up in America. I've heard the story, Japan did horrible atrocities. They were the aggressor. And then even like some of the, well, I think when I was in engineering school somewhere, or I've learned, like when they firebombed, I think it was Tokyo, and like just, raised it to the ground, like that was actually a beneficial thing because it allowed them to rebuild Tokyo as a modern city with like a grid-like structure versus what it was before. And you kind of like sugarcoat some of the loss of like Japan's identity in a way that, oh, well, now they're able to be modern, now they're this modern power and whatnot. So I thought that was fascinating, like how maybe some aspects of Japan had been lost because of how Reconstruction happened and because of how America influenced that.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. definitely intentionally uh, engaged in re-education policies, General MacArthur's re-education policies, um, in a way to, I don't know, maybe turn Japan into kind of like a American mini-me,
Mhm.
a country that would benefit the U.S. economically. Um, I'm doing more research right now into Commodore Perry and how when he came to Japan. And actually, the U.S. was, the manifest destiny idea of going west, going west. You started on the East Coast, and we started taking land all the way across, bought land. We took land. We won land in wars. Got Alaska, then we got Hawaii, and we just kept going and going across the Pacific. We beat Spain in the Spanish War, and then we got Guam and the Philippines. But then we wanted Okinawa too. And Japan was kind of one of the countries in the Pacific Ocean that was, kind of in the way and of our manifest destiny vision. And so I believe actually that, yeah, the U.S. wanted to re-educate Japan because um, they wanted for the purpose of the relationship that they have today. The relationship today is very strange. There's U.S. military bases everywhere. Um, Japan is almost you could it's not a colony, but a lot of these security national security issues have to go through the U.S. That I'm a journalist and I've been working as a journalist in Japan for about 15 years now, and I just see I wonder, is Japan truly independent of the U.S.? Obviously, it comes under the protection of the U.S. and with the military bases, and a lot of people say, oh yeah, Japan can spend their money on other things because the U.S. is here to protect us, to protect the Japanese from China or nuclear North Korea. But I think there's a lot of people in Japan right now who are starting to wake up and be like, wait a minute, are we truly independent? And also, were we told the right history? And there's actually a movement in Japan right now to kind of reclaim that cultural heritage of the heritage of Yamato. And so I really tapped into the psyche of what's going on in Japan. That this movement on this, it's 80 years since World War II. So this 2021, 25, 80 years since World War II. A lot of stuff is happening within Japan. I don't know if you've been watching what's happening politically, but um, there's actually a awakening happening of, wait a minute, who are we as the people of Japan? We've kind of like accepted everything that the U.S. gave us as wonderful, and we have Starbucks in every corner and McDonald's everywhere. but what does it truly mean to be Japanese? And we've kind of a lot of Japanese people have forgotten, and now they're reclaiming that identity. And so this movie came out actually at the perfect time.
Exactly. And full confession, I have not been following little snippets of what's been happening in Japan. There's been a lot of political stuff happening in America that has been keeping me occupied. But I do think I remember
Yes,
hearing,
yes.
I do think I remember hearing that there was a movement because I think Japan is limited to what their military size can be under, the treaty that ended World War II. And I think I heard that there was a movement for them to increase their own domestic forces because they want to be more independent. They want to flex their own muscle. They want to have more of a say in how their country is defended and what they can do. So. One of the things that I thought was really fascinating, I did not expect this movie to go in that way, was the way that you looked into kind of like the origins of the Japanese people and where some of those might have been. I mean, was that just a natural progression of your research into looking back into like Japan's culture and history and where they came from, and then you just kind of like stumbled upon this vein of information that I had never heard of. I'm sure people have talked about it in Japan, but it's something I've never like read in my, washed down history book. So, how did that kind of thread get unraveled?
The Japan ancient Israel connection is an element of Japanese history that has always fascinated me since so I talked to this one scholar when I moved back to Japan from the US after graduating from university in LA. Um,
Wait,
I
which
grew up
university in LA?
it's a small
Okay.
private Christian university called
I know.
Biola
I grew up in
University.
LA,
And
so
okay, yeah, it's in La Mirada, which is right on the border, Orange County and LA County.
nice.
But yeah, I studied film there, and I moved back, and I was talking to a scholar, and my parents, they're Christians, and so they taught, I grew up reading the Bible, and so obviously when I heard ancient Judaism, ancient Jews, Israel, and Japan connection, I mean, you couldn't think of two things more polar opposite, right? I mean, it's like, what?
It
No.
sounds like an internet conspiracy when you say it like that.
And a lot of people categorize it as a conspiracy, and so they wouldn't really take this seriously. But there are a growing number of scholars within Japan who have studied this and who have written a lot of books about these similarities. One scholar that I wasn't able to interview because he passed away just before I was able to, but he actually has been pioneering this idea. The reason I think Japanese people didn't have this, didn't really realize all the connections is because they didn't have that much engagement with Jews or people of Israel, and so they didn't realize the culture. But then this one scholar, he actually worked with Jewish people in New York and in his studies. And then when they start digging up these clay statues that came out of archaeological digs, which you saw in my film, I mean they look exactly like Orthodox Jews, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was
Um,
amazing.
yeah, I mean, and so it took someone Japanese who was engaged with Jewish people, Orthodox Jewish people, to realize that. But he wrote a book about it, and then when I read his book, I was like, no way, I got to go see this. So I went to go to see those clay statues that date back to you know third century, third, fourth century. And so it does look like, at the very least, that a tribe that knew about the Bible, at least, came to Japan's shores and influenced Shinto, and they made clay statues of these people who came, and they do evidently look like Jewish people because of the Pale Orthodox. I mean, anyway, I mean that was just that part of Japanese history that was so fascinating to me, having grown up reading the Bible, and just it was like two of my worlds kind of collided. My parents like Christian biblical world, and then the world of Japan, which didn't seem to mix growing up, but then those two different elements kind of like came together. and that I kind of considered myself kind of like a sort of Indiana Jones going to on the search of the lost Ark. So this movie kind of takes a weird turn where I'm like climbing a mountain in search of the lost Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, yeah, no, that was also interesting. I loved all of that stuff. I thought that was like really fascinating and just something I hadn't seen before. You know, I'm curious, how easy or difficult was it to find people to talk to about this? It seems like the professors that you talked to were interested in talking, but I also liked how you got, some views from, young people, people who, maybe were disillusioned with Japan's kind of trajectory in your life. And also, you talked to someone who had, at least they believed and probably backed up Jewish origins as well. So how tough was it to find these people? How difficult was it to get them to talk? I'm not sure. I don't know how open Japanese people are to interviews and things like that. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, the people that I interviewed are very keen to talk about this. Once they in Japan, there's this thing called, I don't know if you in your studies of Japanese you've learned about this word, but if you don't know about it, it's a really cool word. It's called en or goen. So goen is literally like the connection between people, right? It's building trust, it's building connection. So a lot of people say goen ga arimasu yo ni. I pray that you will have um fruitful connections with people. And especially when it comes to these issues of Japanese history, when it in regards to ancient Israel and these kids of it was really hard to find people until I found this Goen, right? So I fell into favor in a way after meeting people and they started building I started building trust with um this community, and then this guy would introduce me to this scholar, and then this scholar would introduce me to another scholar, and this other scholar introduced me to these kids who were interested in talking. So it would have been impossible for me to film this if I hadn't had this goen, this connection, this fell into favor, building favor and trust with this community. The community is more, I would say, right wing on the right side, and a lot of them are Shinto related. So uh, people that work in shrines and are priests, and a lot of these people are connected because they're interested in these topics, but it is a very tight knit community.
Mhm.
So I had to kind of build a relationship with them before they would trust me. But once one of them trusted me, then it was just dominoes. One after another, I was able to. I mean, those three kids, actually, the four young people in my film were all introduced to me by the scholars who are doing, who are working to educate the Japanese people on their true history and true heritage. So that was really cool. Once I built up Goeng favor and
That's awesome.
connection. Yeah.
And also probably something that you're used to from your journalism, career. So that's awesome that you're able to use that to make this film. One thing I was curious about, and it came out in the end, but I was curious why it wasn't there earlier. You talked about your own kind of experiences with xenophobia, which was my first thought when you're like, I was raised in Japan. I was like, wait, this blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy was raised in Japan. Like that must have been either really interesting because everyone wanted to talk to you, everyone wanted to like get your experience, or it must have been really isolating because I'm sure a lot of people, you know, called you gaijin, called you, a foreigner and whatnot. I mean, when I was in Japan, I look at least somewhat Japanese. I'm taller than a lot of them, but like people would call it like I would experience like foreigner, not like a little bit of xenophobia myself. So I was like I couldn't imagine what you were going through. So I was curious, about those experiences. I'm glad that they did make it in towards the end, so you could have like a little bit more of a personal bent on it. But I was curious why those didn't come up a little bit earlier, kind of to shape how your upbringing was, or if you wanted to just kind of leave them at the end so that they didn't kind of color the rest of the documentary. I was curious about that.
Yeah. Like I said, this was kind of like my soul journey. At the end of the film, I talk about some of the bullying that I experienced just being just not looking like the other boys, right? Which is pretty. I mean, Japan is a country where everyone kind of looks Japanese, especially when I grew up back in the early '80s, mid '80s. There weren't a lot of foreigners back then, so it was, and obviously Japanese people have a very tight knit community, and it's hard to break in. So actually, I brought that in at the end, yeah, just because I didn't want to like focus on that element of my journey right at the beginning, but it was almost like a afterthought when I realized that when I interviewed my one of my bosses from my journal, I work at a TV station in Japan, who's a descendant of the Hata clan, who's it's a descendant of an ancient Jewish tribe that came to Japan in the third and fourth century. I mean, he looks completely Japanese, obviously, right? I mean, he doesn't look like he has Jewish ancestry, but that just kind of like clicked in my mind because I always wanted to fit in. I wanted to look Japanese. I wanted to be Japanese, but I mean, look, I'm blonde, blue-eyed.
You're not gonna look.
I'm nothing. There's no way. I mean, I even, um, dyed my hair black at one point, trying so I wouldn't stand out so much. But I mean, there's no way I was ever going to be Japanese. And so I kind of, grew up just okay. This is just who I am. Like, um, I'm an American, but and then I came to the conclusion that my heart was Japanese, and that kind of made sense to me. And I tried using that with Japanese people, because I always had a hard time explaining who I am to Japanese people because I'm like, yeah, I grew up in Japan, but like, it's more than that. I'm not. I'm an American, but like I truly feel Japanese on the inside. So it's kind of like I feel like a Chevy with like Toyota parts, you know?
A reliable Chevy. I love it.
Yeah, a reliable Chevy. And so I tried really hard growing up, or even into my adulthood and moving back to Japan after university, to explain to the Japanese people who I am, how do I fit in to their society, and of course there was that bullying, so those scars, always stuck with me. So this movie was also a journey to help me find my place in Japan, in society, Japanese society. But when I realized that all these, ancient Israelis, Jewish, and Persians immigrated to Japan in the third and fourth century, influenced culture, built shrines, built, all these things, and influenced Japan for the better, and their descendants now look completely Japanese. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. And then obviously I said my two kids are mixed Japanese American. So I just realized even with my kids, just after having one Japanese parent, they already look, pretty Japanese. But if they probably will marry Japanese spouses and they have kids, so my grandkids will probably look like almost completely Japanese, like,
Mhm.
and then my great grandkids, you probably can't even tell that their great grandfather was white. So I'm just like, okay, wait a minute. So maybe this is like a story of Japan that's not told as much. That okay, Japanese people are Japanese people. Everybody looks Japanese. But if you go back into their ancestry, maybe there are people like me, the Jewish people, Persians, who came and now their descendants all look Japanese. And I'm like, okay, I can work with this. This is something, this is my legacy, like my grandkids will someday look back and be like, oh yeah, my grandfather was this American guy who immigrated or grew up in Japan, immigrated to Japan. And it'll be the same as the Hata clan, the Jewish tribe that immigrated to Japan and influenced Japan for the better. So this is kind of like just that knowledge and that realization allowed me to breathe finally,
Yeah.
kind of like just okay, I'm who and where I say this in the movie, but I finally realized I'm exactly who and where I'm supposed to be, which took 40 years to get there, because of that just not finding of my place here and not fitting in.
Yeah, and I mean, that is a fascinating kind of look into how, like you look at the Persians, Israelites, and things like that, how they might have become Japanese, and then you hear about like the Ainu, who I believe are from Russia, and they still kind of like look a little bit different, and there still is a little bit of inherent kind of like xenophobia about them, and they are culturally Japanese. There's further north, so I thought that was kind of like fascinating how maybe what it means to be Japanese isn't exactly what everyone has kind of thought growing up. So I thought I liked that kind of like integration there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I know we have limited time. I'm going to switch to just lightning round and just lightweight questions about the film. Want to see how your personal experiences map to things in the movie. I imagine they'll map very closely, so I try to keep them, answerable, fun, and lightweight. You can feel free to skip any of them. I will not be offended, but I try to keep them very answerable. First question, have you did research, you found out that, it seems like there is a high likelihood that, ancient Israelites came to Japan and, at least helped shape the culture, helped kind of like make Japan what it was. Have you been to any kind of like Jewish ceremonies, Jewish events, a bar mitzvah, Passover, Seder, something like that?
Yes, in my own spiritual journey, I was I went to Israel in 2018. Absolutely fell in love with the country. Um, I loved, everything. The food, the people were amazing. The people were beautiful. Like, people don't realize how beautiful the people of Israel are. Like, the men and the women, just hot. Everyone is just hot, and they all had these beautiful women with beautiful long brown hair in military uniform carrying their guns, um, sipping coffee in the plaza. It was just such an interesting country, and just when you think of Israel, there's like so many. I mean, in the news, like there's just all this negative news about Israel. And so you always think it's a dangerous place, it's blah blah blah. You hear all these things. But just going there myself, and obviously I told you I grew up reading the Bible, and so Israel's always obviously a key part of the Bible. And when I put my hand on the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, um, I just had this like weird like download of like thousands of years of just what the Israelites, what the Jews went through throughout their history, and the pogroms and the Holocaust, and just running away from different places, and just their story is incredible. And so I have deep respect for the people of Israel after my visit to Israel. And so my love for Israel is definitely evident in this movie as well.
Yeah, exactly. The next question was, have you been to Israel? But you have. In the movie, you are prepped to go, and then circumstances, force you not to be able to. So I was curious, but you have. So the next question: this film also had, some young people. One person was really trying to go to, I think it was Todai, and wasn't able to get in. Another person went to Todai, but then wasn't able to get into law school, and then thought that his, life and career were over. So, question for you. If you were not a filmmaker and a journalist, what do you think you would be? What would your, other career be? Would it be some sort of a religious figure? Because it seems like religion is important to you, or maybe something completely out of left field.
Um, I thought I really wanted to add in my film the guy who tried to go to Todai and decided to become a sidekick of a Shinto priest. I thought that was a really cool turn of events.
Yeah, it was really
So
cool. You got
like
to see
I
some
mean,
really
because
cool, like Shinto ceremonies and things that he was doing to prepare himself, which was fun.
I know it was because growing up in Japan, and everyone, like, the dream is to go to Tokyo University or University Is it Tokyo University or University of Tokyo? University of Tokyo. Anyway, that's it's the Harvard of Japan, and so everybody, you know, if you can get into, Tokyo University, you've made it in life, right? And so that's like the highest goal in Japan, and everyone around me was always going to cram school. They call it
Hmm.
juku. So
Yep.
they go into juku and cram school, and they take all these tests and they study for like months and months and months to get into, a good junior high school so they can get into a good high school, and so they can get into a good, and so they can perhaps get into Tokyo University and then get a great job, and then their life is set. And this trajectory that everyone is on in this competition of education in Japan is just so intense. Now that I'm a father of two mixed Japanese American kids, my son is in junior high, my daughter's elementary school, but like now I'm actually, reliving this educational trajectory that the kids have to be on. They both go to cram school, and it's just insane the pressure that they put on Japanese kids. It's just crazy. And so, to be totally honest, I personally would not didn't would not have been able to survive that kind of competition in education. I um kind of went to the international schools in Japan mostly just because, I mean, there's no way I could have competed with other Japanese kids. And so I went to, yeah, international schools the whole time. And then went to university in the US. So I kind of like was watching all of my
Sidestep.
friends go on this crazy journey of their, just studying for months and months and not coming out of the room. And I was like, oh, I do not want that. No, thank you. I'm going to go the American route where you kind of like, you know, you kind of get just enough done to, I mean, obviously, like, there's, uh, Ivy League schools that are hard to get into, and, all that in the US as well. But I mean, you have a lot more, places to go. You have maybe a little bit more leeway, I guess,
Yeah,
and
yeah, you have a lot more choices.
opportunities, a
Yep.
lot more choices compared to Japan. If I wasn't a journalist slash filmmaker, um, I actually the reason I became a filmmaker was when I was in high school. I was like, okay, what is something that I could do with my life that can make a difference? Really, what truly makes a difference in the world, right? And the two jobs I could think of were uh, politics and media. So I was like, okay, I'm either going to go into media or politics. Which actually helps society more? And so I actually was really into political science, and I studied political science a lot. I was interested in the inner workings of government, not just U.S. politics, but also Japanese politics. And so there was a crossroad where I was either wanted to go into politics or go into the media. But then, so I decided media, journalism, filmmaking, storytelling, because I felt maybe storytelling was a little more maybe powerful and impactful for society.
Mhm.
And I'm glad I made that decision because politics is just now I realize what politics actually is. It's just ugh, there's
Yeah.
no way. I love being involved in Japanese politics. I'm very involved in kind of trying to get young people engaged with the political system, getting them to go to elections. I mean, Japanese young people don't really go to elections much compared to the U.S. So trying to get Japanese people interested in Japanese politics and elections and how that affects their lives. So this making movies in Japan has kind of given me a platform to kind of like speak to young people and to show them how interesting politics can be, but also how important it is for their lives. So in a way, I've been able to do both, kind of in a way.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad that you were able to kind of like not given to or not have to deal with that pressure that young Japanese people face because it is insane from what I hear, from what I see in anime and hear in documentaries.
So insane, so
Uh,
insane.
and the last question. This movie has a lot of focus on food because, Japanese food is a big part of their culture and also like, a big export of Japan. What is your favorite Japanese food or Japanese meal?
I love so much. If you noticed in my film, I actually paid for someone to do animation of Japanese food, right?
Mhm.
Which is I could have, and I also did show actual Japanese food, but I just wanted to like kind of make it last in the minds, linger in the minds of the viewers, just how incredible Japanese food is. Just um, I mean, there's been a huge amount of tourism in Japan, from all over the world, but from the US too. And a lot of my friends in the US who had no interest in Japan, I went to university with or whatever, are texting me and be like, "Hey John, I'm finally making it to Japan. Like, what should I do?" So I have this like what to do list, what to eat list, already on my phone to send to people because everyone's coming to Japan now and everyone's so enthralled with Japan. And the first thing that they realize when they get here is, wow, the food is good, right? You don't really real. I mean, everybody knows, Japanese food is, maybe you like sushi or tempura or ramen or whatever. But you don't truly realize how good the food is until you actually get here. I love um really, really expensive tempura. So tempura that's used when you use like really good white sesame oil, and you go to this place in Shibuya and they deep fry this tempura one by one so you don't so it doesn't get even a little bit
Oh, that sounds so
cold or
good.
stale. So they bring you one like shrimp tempura or whatever tempura vegetable tempura at a time, and you eat it with just like salt or wasabi, and it is like heavenly. It's crazy. I love that. I love eel, unagi. Maybe unagi eel. Maybe Americans don't really know it as much. Maybe you have it like in sushi restaurants, but
Mhm.
Japanese eel is so good. The teriyaki sauce that they put over it. Eel doesn't sound that good, but like once you have it, you're just like, what is this? The texture is like so like perfectly soft and but also like grilled, and it's amazing. So I love grilled eel with a teriyaki sauce. I love tempura. Um, I love and in my movie I talk about raw eggs, right? Like
Mhm.
who eats raw eggs in the world? Nobody. Only Japan eats raw eggs. The reason Japan raw you can eat raw eggs in Japan is they're so careful with just everything that they do to make these eggs, right? The process. They're so careful and they're so diligent to make sure that each egg is taken care of and cultivated, and there's no. I mean, everybody eats raw eggs and nobody gets salmonella. Like it's crazy. So yes, I love all things, all Japanese food,
Love it.
especially eel.
Yeah, all delicious food. So you can grab your favorite Japanese food, eel, sushi, really good tempura, and check out Children of Yamato, which is streaming now on Amazon Prime. This is writer, director, and narrator John LaDue. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.